welcome back to That Film Couple. For those who are new, I'm Caitlin, and I'm here to do a reading wrap-up for 2024. If you want to see last year's edition, I will have that linked in the description box down below. This year, I read about 50 books, ranging in sizes and genre. I'm trying to get more diversified in the books that I read and experience new authors that I haven't ever read before. That was kind of one of my goals, and that's continued on into this year. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right in. So last year I started a reading journal. I just got this from the Harry Potter world when I was studying abroad in London. It's just like your standard notebook, but I made it into a reading journal. And so I tracked every book that I read here. And then I also tracked when I read, if I read a lot or a little, and what days I missed. So it's been really fun. Definitely recommend having a reading journal. And it's incredibly helpful because now I know exactly what I thought about each book that I read this year. So yeah, let's start off with January. So the first book of January was Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. I have never read a book of hers before until this one. So I was not exactly prepared for the writing style, which I heard is pretty common across every book she wrote. So I guess the best way I can describe it, as someone that doesn't know like proper terms, it had a lot of words and it was like poetic language, if that made sense. Like a lot of words that I was not used to seeing, a lot of different unique ways to go about like descriptions or like dialogue writing. Like their whole writing style is something that I hadn't experienced before. And so it was kind of a lot to understand, okay, what is actually happening here? So it took a hot minute, but I did grow to appreciate it, at least for this book. I've heard other things about it not making that much sense in other books she's written, but for Masters of Death I really liked it. I think it added a lot to the atmosphere of the story. So I recalled here really liking the characters and the relationship between the characters, and I also really felt like the ending was nice and wrapped up, but also in like a unexpected way. I remember being really like pleased with that. I know endings can be really rough. I don't know if it's just because the author, decides an ending, but then they write the rest of their book and they don't really fix the ending. But I think a lot of critiques I have about books are primarily in how they ended them, because that'll like leave me with like a bad taste in my mouth. But this particular book I really enjoyed how she ended the book, and I think I really just enjoyed the entire world building as like a whole. I gave it 4.5 stars overall, so it's really well done. I enjoyed that one a lot. Next we have Frozen Charlotte, which is actually my sister-in-law's favorite book. So she recommended it to me. This is by Alex Bell. I had never heard of it before, but I guess it's like a series, and this is like the first one in the series. And I did not expect it to be as scary as it was. It definitely like surprised me a bit. I was also surprised because the whole book is about like these like little dolls as like the main like antagonist, right? And obviously I do find dolls and then those storylines to be scary in general, but this one was interesting because the dolls actually exist and they're also very tiny. So I was like really surprised at the scares that we were able to have in the book. I did recall in like my journal here that I had low expectations going in, but I was really affected by the book. Made me feel on edge and anxious. I do remember not being able to predict the ending, which I absolutely love for a thriller or horror. And I described it as both a murder mystery and a supernatural epic. And I also said, I also hate that Frozen Charlottes are actual dolls. I really did not want to know that. But yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised. I think the setting and the location was also really nicely done. There's a lot of, I guess, gaslighting on the main character, but also us as the audience of like, is what she's going through actually happening, or are we seeing her go crazy? Is she a reliable narrator? And we're feeling like a lot of those different things. So it was a nice scary read to begin the year, and I gave this one 5 stars overall. So next, I finally, in January and February, I finally finished off every book that Sarah J Maas ever wrote. So I started off 2024 finishing Crescent City series, which is I guess you can consider it like the last series within the multiverse that she's written. That's at least how like I was told to read it, is like leave Crescent City for last, start with ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, and then Crescent City. So that's exactly what I did. But what I did that was slightly different was I read the first Crescent City book, and then I went back to the last ACOTAR book, because I heard that they kind of happen at like the same time. This is also just before the last Crescent City book had like come out. So because I knew that there was some like multiverse stuff happening, I wanted to make sure I remembered what happened in ACOTAR. And I had only read ACOTAR in 2023 in like the spring, so I wanted to like refresh my memory. So I first read Crescent City, which is just the name of like the first book, and this was a really hard read. I agree with what my friend said, and it was perhaps the best book Sarah has ever written, because it was so emotional. I remember crying so hard, but also blowing through it, like reading the entire thing in only just like a couple of days. The world building was really great. I was definitely a little worried about fantasy that's set in a world that's closer to ours with like technology or phones. Like that's always where I'm like, like it can kind of be bad or like very rarely good. I was pleasantly surprised. I think they title that like urban fantasy because it's like closest to our way of life. So I was pleasantly surprised about that. I really did enjoy the world building. I really fell in love with the characters. I said that I was nervous but excited for the sequels, and I love the multiverse that I'm about to explore. I just hope everyone survives is what I wrote down. But yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I might even reread it at one point. I've debated rereading other books of hers. But yeah, I just thought it was really emotional, really touching, and I really enjoyed it overall. So I gave that one a 5-star rating. And then, like I said, I went back and read the last ACOTAR book, which is A Court of Silver Flames. I don't quite remember what I rated it the first time I read it, but this time around I did rate this one 5 stars. And I still love this book. Even from the first time I read it, I absolutely enjoyed it. I really like Nesta as a character. I know some people dislike her, that's why they didn't want to read this particular book, because she was the main character, but I really like her. I like complicated characters, or I guess like anti-hero characters where they're kind of evil at the end of the day, but trying to be good in other aspects. And I did remark that I am excited for future books because I think there's so many things that are left unanswered. I will say I wasn't exactly happy with how Crescent City series ended, which makes me very nervous for the future ACOTAR books, but I'll get to that in a sec. So yeah, I loved searching for Easter eggs. It was especially interesting reading Crescent City and realizing all the different connections between like the multiverse that's happening. I don't really remember all the details now, but I remember being pleasantly surprised about the Easter eggs. And I literally said, I really don't care about Elaine and Azriel, but I imagine the next book will change my mind. Yeah, I feel like because obviously people are setting up for like the next ACOTAR book. There's these 2 characters, Elaine and Azriel, that are pretty much confirmed going to be the main characters in the next book, but I still don't care about them. Even after ACOTAR and the multiverse and whatnot, I actually care less about them because of all the multiverse inserts. So we'll see. Obviously, even as I'm like recording this and gonna post it, I have heard nothing about if she's like how she's writing it. I just know she is writing it. I just don't know when it's gonna be published. So maybe I'll change my mind when I hear what the book's actually about. But yeah, that was January, and on to February. All right, so continuing on with Crescent City, I went right into book 2. I actually read almost the entirety of book 2 at a sleepover, like a 24-hour readathon sleepover. I think I did vlog that, and it should be posted, if not now, then like very soon. So definitely go check that out. I can also tag that down below. But I also devoured this one up. It was very different from the first one in the sense that I felt like there wasn't like this one final thing they were trying to achieve, one final goal. It felt like a smattering of goals that would all lead into the final book, if that makes sense. So I felt more like a journey that we were on, not necessarily getting from point A to point B. But I still really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the expanding of characters that we got. We got to meet a whole lot of new people. We got to explore new things about characters that we already met in the first one. So I really enjoyed that. I remember remarking that I still have so many questions. And I remember being terrified for everyone. There's a lot of like shocking information that we got about people and learning how people were like interconnected within each other. People being like former lovers of another person, or people realizing that the person that they trust is actually someone who's supposedly on like the bad side. Like there's all these like different like twists and turns that happened, which I appreciated. Obviously ends on a cliffhanger as we go into the third book. But I was really excited for how the multiverse was introduced. And I think it was pretty well done. I also rated this one 5 stars. I'm not going to hop into the last book yet because I have a lot of things to say about the last book. But in between, I did read a new author that I hadn't read before, which is Lauren Asher. And I read the Dreamland Billionaire series is what it's called. But the first book is called The Fine Print. And I had heard really good things about this series on TikTok. I was not prepared for how bad the first book would be. Mostly in the sense that I just could not like the characters. There's just something about them that annoyed me. In the way that like the book was written, I was just like, I don't care about either of them. The whole premise is basically, it's like this is a world where Walt Disney doesn't exist. The brother's grandfather was Walt Disney, and now that the grandfather is dead, the brothers are having to fulfill the wishes of his will in order to then gain different parts of the company. And the will and the letters they got always basically end up in them ending up with a love interest, and a series of events through that. But I really did not like this first book at all. I rated it 3.5 stars. I thought the main love interest, the girl, I thought she was insufferable. And I literally remarked that I only started liking her after the first 100 pages, which is sad. I feel like you should like the love interest, and literally it's dual point of view as well, so you see her and her thoughts, and I just could not stand reading it, which is sad. Like I feel like if you're gonna read her perspective for literally half the book, you should actually enjoy her as a person. I could not. I did not like her at all. I did not find her relatable. I found the premise of their relationship also not very unique. The male love interest is like the classic moody, broody, whatever, which isn't unique at all. And then she's like, oh, sunshine, rainbows, something that we've seen many a times before. I was not exactly impressed. I also, I did remark here, I did not expect to get Walt Disney grandson fan fiction. I did not even know that that's what the book was about. I did not know that it was a company like that. I thought it was just like a romance, but it was not. I thought the whole thing was really cringy. I got more into it as we went along, but even then I just was not impressed. I was almost like sad that I asked for the whole series for Christmas, because it's like, well, now I feel obligated to read these books, even though I don't think they're that well done. Thankfully, I did read the other 2 books this past year. I did like the other 2 books more. But it is always sad when the first book just doesn't live up to your standards, because it made me have low expectations for the other 2. So yeah, 3.5 stars. And then another book I was not exactly thrilled about, the final book in the Crescent City series, House of Flame and Shadow. I did give this one 4 stars, which is my usual standard rating for books. I have to be really blown away to give it a 5. But 4, when the other 2 books were 5s, is a pretty decent downgrade. And I actually was mad. I gave it that grade specifically because of the ending, like I said. The ending was so atrocious, in my opinion, that it made the rest of the book also bad. Maybe if I reread it, which I doubt I will, but if I ever reread it one day, we'll see how I feel. But I was actually upset at the fact that I noticed, like, I picked up on a pattern where, I guess, and I don't know how I didn't pick on this up on this beforehand, but it seems like every book she writes, there's this gang of characters that are basically like protected, and you can almost pretty much guarantee that nothing really bad will happen to them. And it was like fine, whatever, with the other books, because I didn't pick up on this pattern. But by the third series, I'm tired of this premise where like a whole cast of characters are like protected and have plot armor and are guaranteed to not die. I actually was like, why are more people not dying? This is a war. This is a battle. We need some of these people to die. We need some of these people to go away. I was so disappointed. I thought honestly, none of this is realistic, but realistically, half of these people would be dead. And yes, that would be sad and potentially traumatizing, but you can still do that and have the main character survive, and it still has more impact than saying, oh, they all survived. Yay! You're gonna have to be sad. Like, no, kill some of them, please. Like, not all of them needed to die. And I literally remarked that it had the same plot ending as the 3rd ACOTAR book. Okay, I think that one's called, I'm like reading it right now, A Court of Wings and Ruin. There's also a major battle at the end of that book where pretty much everyone lives. And like there's like a fake out where you think a character's like dead, but then they like actually aren't. Like they come back to life. She basically repeated that plot. Like, we've already done this before. I'm bored. I'm tired. Just kill some people. Get them out of the way. I know everyone dislikes the Harry Potter series for that. But again, realistically, a lot of these people would be dead. It's just like, I think people do need to die in a war. Like, I don't know why we're not writing that. Why we're making sure that everyone lives. So yeah, I don't know. I just was really disappointed in that. It felt like, I guess it took away all of the stakes. When you see the pattern, it's like, oh, you already know that everyone's fine. I think that's what made the first Crescent City book shocking, was so many people that you thought were gonna stick around were killed. And so you felt more like emotional, but then by the 3rd book, it just like fell off. I hope that made sense. But yeah, 4 stars. Not my favorite out of all of them. But thankfully, the last book of February, I absolutely adored. It's Beach Read by Emily Henry. I gave this one a 5-star rating. Absolutely love this book. I fell in love with it pretty much as soon as I started reading. I got sucked right in. I really liked the characters. I like how it's, I guess, sort of like enemies to lovers, but there's more to it than that. There's more nuance. There's more growth for the characters. And at times it wasn't even like the romance that got me interested. It was also just like them as characters and wanting them to grow, because both the characters are writers, like they're like writing a book. And so seeing them grow and change was also very interesting and very well done. And I thought it was basically, I literally wrote sweetest romance ever. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. I loved watching them grow closer together and also grow as characters. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I will probably read it again because it was very good romance. It made me want to read Emily Henry more because that was my first book of hers. So maybe in this year I will read more of her. Okay, so now we get into March, and we had some interesting takes. I might be trolled for this one, but I did not like The Song of Achilles. That was the first book I read in March. I was not prepared, I guess, for the subject matter. I was just kind of put off immediately by, like, I don't know how to say it, but it was just like, you're mentioning violence very dismissively. And I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting the writing to do that. And I guess I don't usually ask for this, but I kind of wish I had read some sort of trigger warning before reading it. Because it threw me for a loop from like the first couple of pages, and I couldn't really get out of that rut as I continued reading it. So I don't know, I guess I just would have like appreciated trigger warnings, or have like done more research on the books that I would have seen, you know, what topics are going to be covered in this book. So yeah, I got emotionally like checked out pretty quickly, but I did still commit to finishing the book. I liked the characters, but I didn't like fall in love with the story. And it was a good pace. I don't actually quite know a lot of the actual like myth of like Achilles and like the story surrounding that, and his like relationship with Patroclus, I think is how you say it. I don't quite know 100% like the full story, but I do know that this is like a retelling of it. So I think as far as like retellings go, this was one of my first times like reading that. So it was pleasant in the sense that I enjoyed reading about a time period I never really read upon, which is like Trojan War, Greece, that time period. I don't really read a lot of books around that era. So I was happy that I still read it. It was nice seeing the world developed. But again, I just kind of, if I had known what I was going to be reading, then maybe I would have responded a little bit better. Now that I know what it's about, maybe I could reread it to get an even like fresher view. It's just I felt like a lot of people were saying that it was so like sad but also lovely, and they really like the romance aspect in it, but no one mentioned any of like the violence or anything further than that. They didn't really go into detail, which I guess I understand, but still, like, I wish I would have appreciated a little bit more of a warning. So yeah, I rated it 3.5 stars. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But again, now that I know what it's about, and maybe if I look into the actual story of like Achilles, and the actual myth behind it, maybe I can appreciate it more. Just wasn't my favorite. Next was a pretty wild book. I actually bought this book from Barnes & Noble back in high school, I think, and I had never read it. But it's a Phantom of the Opera retelling, but also fan fiction. It's called Roseblood by A.G. Howard. And I felt like that this was entirely something that I felt like could be posted on like a fan fiction website, and not something that you would think could get published, because that's how, I guess, childish the writing was, and the plot felt all over the place. It basically, the point of the book is you have this girl go to France where the original Phantom of the Opera book was based upon. And then she has, like, I guess a similar experience to how the Phantom of the Opera book goes, except it's like the Phantom's son doing the like stalking in the castle or boarding school or whatever, even though the Phantom himself is still alive. I don't know. There's a lot of like science fiction-y supernatural elements that I was really taken aback by. I just remember like literally jaw dropped laughing at how ridiculous the plot was getting. I did not like a single one of the characters. I have a section here where I write down like my favorite characters, and I said honestly none. I did not think any of this was okay. I thought the plot twist made no sense. The whole trope that you see in writers, and I'm like shocked because usually this is like how teenagers write, where like, oh, like a girl, she has like a mysterious condition and woe is me, but then oh, there's a love interest that loves her despite the condition or is the cause of the condition. Like, it's like, I don't know, none of it just made sense. And I found the condition she had where she faints when she sings to be very weird. Made no sense. And yeah, I said I felt like I was reading Wattpad in a bad way. Cringed every 5 seconds. I could not take anything seriously. I only finished it because I had to know how this roller coaster of a plot could get worse. Yeah, so I rated it 2.5 stars. Because it was so cringy and funny, I think that's why I gave it 2. But honestly, a 1 could also suffice. Thankfully, I read some really good books after this because I finally finished the core original Percy Jackson series in the month of March. Well, not finished the whole thing, but I started it. So I already read The Lightning Thief a long time ago. I didn't feel like I needed to reread it because I already pretty much knew how it went. So I hopped right into Sea of Monsters as the second book, and I gave this one a 5 star. I thought it was so much fun. I loved hearing Percy's dialogue. I thought he's generally a really funny character, and getting like inside of his mind was really enjoyable. I said I am enjoying more of the action sequences so that I can properly imagine how it all looks. I find that sometimes with writers that are like writing like action sequences, I can't really follow what's happening. Like, it feels kind of all over the place and I can't really visualize it. But Rick Riordan's writing really is perfect for me. I was able to follow along like with everything that was happening, and I could really see and visualize and have like a proper image of what was happening. And I just really liked his writing overall. I was definitely excited for all the little Easter eggs of what could happen later in the other books. And I was happy that I didn't actually know what was going to happen, because I had seen Sea of Monsters in theaters, like the original movies. So I had like a vague idea of what was happening, but I definitely still didn't expect what I was reading. And I just really loved the journey overall. So yeah, that's why I gave that one a 5 star. And I went right into the next book because I needed to know what would happen next. So I went right into Titan's Curse. I also gave this one a 5 star. I said that I remarked that it did feel different from the other 2 Percy Jackson books, but I liked it nonetheless. I think it was because of the setting. I remarked how it wasn't during the summer. And I think that's what makes, I guess, like Harry Potter a little bit repetitive in the first couple of books, because it always happens during the school year. But this is like the opposite. Percy Jackson happened in the summer primarily in the first 2 books, and then suddenly we're in like a school year setting. So we're really changing it up, which I appreciated a lot. And it was interesting seeing the progression of the antagonists, with like Luke and Kronos. And I was sad that certain people died. People should die in a war. Thank you, Rick. But I did also have a lot of questions, and I felt like it was like the perfect setup for the next book, and it made me really excited to read the next book. And I was absolutely like eating it up. I was absolutely loving it, hence why I finished the entire series. So on to April. So April, we get into the Battle of the Labyrinth, which is the 4th book in this series. Again, I gave it 5 stars. I gave every single book in this series 5 stars. And I remarked that the book had many twists and turns that pleasantly surprised me. I did really enjoy the setting of the labyrinth. I thought it was really unique. And again, made me want to do research on the actual like Greek myths about these things, because it was so well detailed and just like a lot of fun overall. I was glad that every book was different, but all kind of leading up to what you can assume to be like a final battle in the last book. I did remark that I was worried the gang won't be able to hold off our main antagonist for that long. And I I did remark that I was worried that that a lot of them would be at risk of death in the next book. And I think that's a good thing. We should be worried about our characters. That made me even more excited to see how everyone would like get like a resolution. And I did consider it to be the most enjoyable book overall. There's something so fun and interesting about the labyrinth and the different levels they went into in this book. And going obviously right into The Last Olympian, another 5-star book. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was a really amazing full circle moment, and I really appreciated how the great prophecy that we're introduced to at like the beginning was revealed and solved. But it wasn't one of those things where you're like, you know exactly how it's gonna get resolved. You just kind of see things get revealed or alluded to, which makes the ending even more satisfying, which I really enjoyed about this book. I loved every moment, and I was actually sad that it was done. There was one character, I don't even remember her that well. Her name was Rachel. If you remember the books, please tell me who she is, because I remember I literally wrote, I don't like Rachel. I'm not interested to see her in the next books. So I guess maybe she is in the next books. I don't quite remember who she is, but it did make me excited to see how the rest of like his series, because he has so many books within this whole Greek series. So I'm very curious as to how the other books were, but I think it's a very solid series overall. I'm really happy that I read it, because again, like I hadn't really read it, only seen those like 2 movies. So yeah, it was very enjoyable, very fun. I will totally reread that in the future. And just like a fun time overall. We kind of pivoted towards the end of April. I decided to pick up Pride and Prejudice for the first time. I had never read it before, and this book took me a very long time to read. I have found that classics are one of the hardest books for me to read, which makes complete sense because the language is different. The things they're alluding to are things that I've never experienced before. This is like the, 1800s? Yeah, something, I think early 1800s. So there's a lot that I was not prepared for. It took me a very long time. I did have to listen to audiobook, just try to get through it a little bit quicker, and that did help, as I was able to hear like the sounds of their dinner party versus just reading the dialogue or that sort of thing. So like putting me within the story definitely helped. It did say that it was hard read. There were many times I didn't know if I could get through the chapter. I had to listen to the audiobook to help me understand. But I did think it overall was a really pretty novel. I understood a lot more of what was happening towards like the end. I guess it was more like the first bunch that I was kind of confused on. I actually read another classic later on in the year, and I was so happy that Jane Austen wrote differently than this other person did, because what I have now found is that sometimes authors go on tangents that make no sense to the plot. I felt like Jane kept to the plot, which I appreciated. There wasn't all these random tangents that felt like, what are we doing? It felt all kind of interconnected, which I appreciated. I think that makes her a little bit of a better writer, but I'll get to that later. And I also remarked that the love was fully believable, and I can see how it is the basis of many modern romances today. And I also said that I was very excited for the next season of Bridgerton now. It got me in the mood for it because it is like around the same time. But yeah, the love story was really well done. I can't really say I can't really say that I can define what trope there is. I feel like everyone now just like defines romances by different tropes, but this one truly, it just felt natural and believable, and both of their back and forths made sense. Like, I guess like all like miscommunication or believing, already having like preconceived notions about like another person and their personality and who they are, how that like affects a relationship even before it's even started. So I thought that was really interesting and like a nice change from like your standard, oh, they go back and forth and then they're in love and then the book's done. Like, I felt like there was much more to it than just that. So I thought it was really well done. Overall, I gave it 4 stars. So yeah. So there is this book series that I started reading in 2023 called Crave by Tracy Wolff. And if you recall how I felt last year, I did not like it at all. The ending completely surprised me in a very bad way. But what I find for some reason is I enjoy bad books to an extent, especially ones where it's so bad that I now need to know what the author's going to do next, because genuinely I can no longer predict. And that is why I have continued reading this series. It's 6 books overall, all of them ginormous. I think on Libby, I was reading it on my phone, it was like 1,000 pages, but in person, if you like picked it up, it was like 700, 800 pages or whatever. And I do not believe these books are well written by any means, primarily because it felt like, again, this is written as if you're going chapter by chapter and then coming back to it 2 weeks and be like, let's see how I can change things up. And that's exactly how I feel like young writers write their books. So that's always shocking to me when I see a published work doing that. And so, but I just needed to know what happened next. So I jumped right into the second book. I actually gave the second book 3.5 stars, which I think I feel like because I actually liked the book. I think that was like the craziest part, is I enjoyed my time. But I still obviously just don't understand the decisions that were being made. I don't understand I I don't understand a lot of the world building choices and the different things. This is a supernatural book after all. But I didn't appreciate the selection of monsters that we have available. I said I don't understand the decisions in this book, but I feel like it's growing on me. And yeah, there's just something addicting about it. And it just makes no sense. This particular book, it follows the main character who's dating this guy, but the guy's older brother is locked in her subconscious. And so she can speak and communicate with the older brother, who clearly has feelings for her, while her boyfriend's like standing right over there. If that wasn't already wild enough, like there's way more that happens in the books too. But none of these books make any sense. And maybe that's why I like them. Maybe I do secretly just love a little bit of bad, crazy plot. But yeah, so yeah, I actually read 2 books out of the Crave series. I read Crush this month. Yeah, so yeah, 3.5 stars. Very strange book. But I did enjoy it to an extent. So I have read Ali Hazelwood before. I'd only read 1 book of hers before, and that was The Love Hypothesis. So I decided to read a few more of her books this year, and one of them being Bride. So that was the first book of May, and I guess this is her first time going on a more like, I guess you could say like supernatural romance space, because she usually just writes standard human-based romances. This one was different. So I thought it was interesting. There was some things that I was not expecting, but I guess some things that are like standard for supernatural romances. Like different ways that like how vampire is spelled with a Y instead of an I. different things about werewolves and their society or how they do romances. I guess like it's pretty standard, but I have not really read much supernatural romances outside of like Twilight. So the rules, I guess I just wasn't like expecting. Hence why I didn't really understand a lot of what was happening. But I did devour the book in 3 sittings. It didn't take me that long. It was also a shorter book too. I hadn't, up until this point, read a plot that's like called Marriage of Convenience, where 2 people who are not in love get married. I guess it's almost like arranged marriages. I hadn't really read much of that plot beforehand, but I was like pleasantly surprised by it, and I did go on to read, I think, one other book with that same plot later on this past year. I did say that there is a severe lack of world building, and I just I'm not going to read everything that I wrote, but I did not understand what was happening. Particularly, I noticed a lack of world building, particularly when things got intimate, because then I was just like, whoa, wait, what is happening? I don't know what you're referring to. This isn't what I thought happened. I just felt like none of it made sense. And I heard people mentioning like, oh yeah, this is like standard, like you'll see this being described in other books, and I'm like, why is it described like that? Like, why can't you just make it a little bit more human when you get to things like that? That way it actually makes sense and I know what's happening, versus when you give all these like terms or whatnot, then I'm left confused. That probably, what I just said, probably also makes absolutely no sense to someone who has not read this book before. But I just did not understand how the characters were not compatible and why intimacy was treated so weirdly and different. And like, I don't know why we couldn't describe it as how you would describe humans being intimate with one another. There was just a disconnect there that I didn't understand, which is why I say there's a lack of world building, because I feel like if I was told like a little bit more about why they're not compatible, then maybe I would have understood. But that was not the case. And I also remarked that the ending was not satisfying, but I was happy regardless. But overall, not the most memorable romance I've ever read. Another unmemorable romance was Jenny Han's P.S. I Still Love You. This is the To All the Boys I Loved Before series. This is the second book in the series. I enjoyed To All the Boys I Loved Before. Obviously, I think it's written for a demographic younger than me. So some of it I'm like rolling my eyes at because it's all high school related drama. But this one irked me so much more than the first one. I only saw the first movie on Netflix and I enjoyed the first movie, hence why I wanted to read the books. But I really don't like where the plot is going. I don't understand the trope that you see a lot in books, particularly romances that have more than one book in it, where they break up every book and then get back together at the end despite them still not being a great couple match. I think the only other time I've seen this was High School Musical. I'm like, yeah, Troy and Gabriella are great, but they break up every movie, which makes no sense to me. I just don't know how you can like be so awful to each other at different times and then still want to get back together, still like not communicating to one another and let different arguments split you up and then you get back together again. Like, I just don't understand why anybody wants that in a relationship. Personally, I enjoy relationships that are just continuous. If anything, they get better over time, not get worse, and then you're on again, off again. That just makes no sense to me. I especially hated it in this book, because in this book, we are introduced to an even better love interest. Yet, she still goes back to her ex. Like, I was just so upset. I now consider the relationship between the two main characters to be awful and toxic. I think the male love interest has a lot of issues. He does not tell Laura Jean anything. Basically what's happening in this book is he keeps basically talking like the main male love interest, Peter, he keeps talking to his ex-girlfriend. And when his ex-girlfriend online bullies Laura Jean, he like knows about it and doesn't do anything to stop her, like calling her a bunch of names, insinuating a whole bunch of things about her. But like he can't let his ex go because his ex's parents are divorcing, and that's like really rough, so he needs to be there for her, despite that girl being literally so awful to his girlfriend. Like I don't know why we're taking sides like that, or why we're allowing an ex to publicly shame and humiliate your current girlfriend on the internet. That alone just makes no sense to me, and there's a lot of other things that I dislike about his character, yet the author still wants them to stay together, even into the next book. So I just don't understand how you can disregard a completely solid love interest, where they have fantastic chemistry with one another, just because, oh, I started the book series with this one couple being together, they need to stay together. No, absolutely not. So yeah, I thought it was completely toxic, and Laura Jean, the character, doesn't have enough respect for herself to know when she is allowed to leave a relationship for treating her terribly. And I don't think it's a good book to read, because I don't want to read about a toxic relationship. So I have left the last book on hold. I feel inclined to read it only because it's there on my shelf. And I feel bad not reading everything on my shelf, but I promise you I will not enjoy it. So yeah, 3 stars. Actually, I'm surprised I gave it 3. Now that I'm remembering it, I feel like I should give it 2. I think I'm going to edit that. Next book was a great romance, thankfully. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I was really pleasantly surprised. And I had expectations going into this book. I think I've mentioned in the past that You've Got Mail is my all-time favorite romance movie, and I went into this book assuming it was going to be like a similar plot where people are like pen pals, they don't realize it, but actually there's way more happening in this book, and there's way more like fantasy elements that I wasn't like expecting, but I was really pleasantly surprised about it, and I think it bled nicely into the sequel as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book overall. I thought it was really amazing. I cried, I laughed, I was captivated by the story, I was rooting for the main characters. I did say that the cliffhanger left me pretty distraught, hence why I know I loved it so much. Yeah, it was a pretty rough cliffhanger. But again, it's a book that has war in it, so we need to be concerned about our characters. But yeah, 5 stars overall. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. Last book was a pretty rough read, but I was reading it because I was annotating it for a friend. I wanted to gift them a book, so I went in and wrote annotations or drew little doodles or drawings on it, but I overall thought the book was bad, which I think is funny. I gave them a book and I was like, hey, just letting you know, I didn't like this book, but you should still read it because I annotated every page. I don't know if they ever read it, but this is The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. I gave this one 3 stars. I consider the main character of Nina to be insufferable. I couldn't stand her internal monologue. I literally said, I cannot relate to someone who insists that their life revolves around books so much that having meaningful relationship with others is not needed. She should have gone to therapy instead of dealing with it all on her own. So yeah, there's like 2 different things that are happening. There's like her father, who she barely knows, dies, and now she's meeting all these different like family members and dealing with learning new things about him. And then she's also falling in love with this guy that she met at trivia night, but her I guess introverted ways are getting in the way of that relationship working out well. So yeah, she's definitely going through a lot, but I found her annoying because of how much she read. That sounds crazy to say because I also read a lot of books, but she just made that her whole entire personality, and I was fed up with it by the end of the book. So yeah, 3 stars overall. And that was May. On to June. So June, I finally finished up the sequel to Divine Rivals. It's called Ruthless Vows, but I gave this one a 4.5 stars. And I think it wasn't necessarily the ending in itself. It was more how we got to the ending. So basically, there's this whole thing where we're building up strength and knowledge to defeat this this god that's like destroying the earth, basically. And it's like an exciting journey to read that and hear about it, but then they kill the god in like 2 seconds. So it's like all this buildup for a very unsatisfying death of a major antagonist character. And I was just left like, that's it? We spent the whole book and you're done? There's no issue? Your life's not in danger? You just did it and wow, it's over? Like, I was a little not happy about that. But I was happy with the resolutions that we had. I think there was still many times that I was sad, different character losses. But again, it's war. People should die. So I was happy about that. And I thought it was a really good ending overall. I loved the journey. And I would gladly read 5 more epilogues if I could, because I really enjoyed the epilogue. I think that like sweetened up the ending a lot more. But overall, I gave it a 4.5 stars because of the unsatisfying death of a major antagonist. And then in June, I had never fully read the entire Harry Potter series. So finally, I finished it. I had only the last 2 books, Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, to read. So finally finished that. I can say I finally read all of them, and then I never have to read them again. And I can move on with my life. That's basically how I saw it. So I gave both of these books 5 stars. They are my favorite out of the entire series, so this is not surprising. And so yeah, Half-Blood Prince first is my favorite Harry Potter movie. So I was definitely excited to read about what actually happens in the book. I know people said that like Half-Blood Prince as a movie is not that great because it felt like there was a lot of things they couldn't add because there's just like so much detail in the Half-Blood Prince book, which I agree makes complete sense. There's a lot that's happening. But I really enjoyed it. Loved the world building. A lot that I didn't expect. And I learned so much more about Voldemort than I had ever learned prior. So I felt like I was like discovering new things. I was getting really excited. And it really put everything together for me for that final book, Deathly Hallows. I said, obviously I've seen the movie, so I knew what to expect, but I really enjoyed the ride. I enjoyed the pacing. And the timeline was unlike what I originally thought. It was definitely interesting seeing how part 1 and part 2, because they like filmed the Deathly Hallows in 2 different movies. It was nice seeing how they actually blend together. And I definitely didn't think I even fully processed how quick that last movie is, because the last movie is taking place over the course of only like 2 days, when obviously you're watching a whole movie and you think it takes longer. So having all this build up to then acknowledge that is one final battle, and that's the whole end of the book, and that's also the whole end of the Deathly Hallows Part 2 movie, that really put it into a lot of more like perspective for me to know like how quickly things unraveled to the point where a major battle was needed. So I was really surprised, like pleasantly surprised by that. I devoured it. I liked seeing the side characters a lot more. Obviously there's a lot of people in the story, so it was nice seeing them progress, seeing who lives, who dies, and specifically with like major characters like Lupin, like actually hearing more about him and hearing more about his romance, or hearing more about someone's parents, or minor characters that we don't even see in the movies. So it was really nice getting more like well-rounded picture of everybody that's involved in this final battle. It obviously made the deaths more heartbreaking as we learned even more about them over the series. But I still absolutely adored the ending. So yeah, 5 stars. So the last book of June was the second book in the Dreamland Billionaires series, Terms and Conditions. I liked this one a lot more, and this was the second Marriage of Convenience book that I said that I read this year. I do kind of enjoy that plot now. I think it's interesting for a romance overall. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. I liked the characters a lot more in this one. I thought they were more dynamic, much less insufferable. I liked the lead female character a lot more. I genuinely believed their romance, which helps. I enjoyed getting to know them better. I was definitely interested in the last book. I wasn't prepared for the last book, but I did enjoy the setup that we got before going into the last one. So yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting overall. And yeah, sad. Thankfully, this book made me feel sad at certain points. The first one didn't. But I thought this one was much better. I think I might have even given the last book 5 stars. I'm not quite sure, but we'll get there. But yeah, that was June. On to July. So July was a pretty rough month for me. A lot of things were happening. That's when wedding planning really like kicked it up a notch. So I only read one book, and that was The Viscount Who Loved Me, which is the second book in the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn. I read the first book, I want to say early 2023, or maybe like middle of 2023. I can't quite remember, but it was definitely before the fall. So I finally picked up the second one and read it, and I gave this one 5 stars. I had already seen this show prior to reading, so I had a lot of expectations. Kind of disappointed about how far the show deviated from the initial plot, but I was still happy with the initial plot of the book, if that makes sense. I did like the drama that was present in the Bridgerton season, the TV season, but I still think the romance was enough to keep me satisfied with the second book. I definitely love the progression. I still enjoyed the book despite lack of drama. I appreciated the sweetness and genuine nature of the relationship that the couple had. I enjoyed getting to know them as individuals. And I did honestly enjoy this sister relationship that we got to see in a different light. I felt like in the TV show, because they were both kind of in love with the same person, there was more competition and you felt like they were being like pitted against each other. But in the book, it was much more sweet and loving of a sister relationship, like older sister, younger sister. You got to see that develop more. There's not really competition between the two of them, so you saw them like loving on each other and supporting each other. So I just thought it was really sweet. It's a very sweet rendition. And I also loved Whistledown, which is like this other narrator figure in the books. I loved the commentary that was happening. I thought that was added like a lot of humor. And so yeah, I really enjoyed that. And that was January on to August. I meant July. That was July on to August.
So this video became longer than I thought, which means it's going to be a part 2. Go like and subscribe and go watch that video. Bye!